that should set out the core principles for just peace. President Zelensky himself has presented this peace formula. He states that he is open to discuss, but the peace formula should be for all of us the basis for all of our efforts and the basis we start on working. Then in the G7 we will also discuss sanctions, and we will of course take stock of the existing sanctions and future measures. As you know, the Commission has proposed the 11th package of sanctions. It is focused mainly on enforcement and anti-circumvention. And this, of course, is, as always, very closely coordinated with the other G7 that are building also similar packages. Finally, in Reykjavik, we will discuss how to hold Russia accountable. I will very strongly support the creation of a dedicated tribunal to bring Russia's crime of aggression to trial. We will also decide on setting up a register of damage in The Hague. It will be a first step, but a very good step towards Russian compensation. So far for Ukraine. The second key topic of this sequence of summits and meetings is how to manage the relationship with a changing China. While we all have our independent relationships with China, I'm confident that the G7 leaders will convene on a set of very core shared principles. First of all, we seek a multifaceted approach to our economic relationship with China. It is characterized by de-risking, not very core shared principles. First of all, we seek a multifaceted approach to our economic relationship with China. It is characterized by de-risking, not decoupling. At the same time, we will seek to cooperate with China on issues of global concern, like, for example, climate change. Of course, we are competing with China. This means we have to strengthen our own economic vibrancy. We have to do our homework in our economies. We will reduce strategic dependencies. We have learned the lessons of the last year. And we stand together as partners on core foreign policy and security challenges. That means we will keep calling on China to refrain from supporting Russia's war. We will reaffirm our unwavering commitment to peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. We acknowledge the One China policy. We are collectively opposing any unilateral change to the status quo, particularly if by force. And another topic, we will protect a narrow set of advanced technologies of which we know that they will determine next generation military advantage. And this brings me naturally to the topic of economic security. It's a new topic, it's an important topic. We've seen attempts of economic coercion, for example, China towards Lithuania. We've seen similar practices vis-à-vis Japan and Australia. We are most vulnerable to coercion in general, where dependencies build up. And that's why we're taking action so seriously to enhance our resilience, so to prevent vulnerabilities. We have, for example, to reduce our dependencies on critical raw materials. We spoke about it a lot. That is the reason why we proposed the Critical Raw Materials Act. And, for example, on advanced technologies, as you know, we are currently reflecting on upgrading our toolkit. For example, on outbound investment screening or advanced export controls. Japan is already since long a front-runner in this area. That has therefore made economic security a central theme of their G7 presidency. And on all of this, which I have just discussed, the Commission will table an economic security strategy in June. The last horizontal theme I want to highlight relates to clean tech. Decarbonization is the challenge of our century, without any question. We all need and want to build competitive, clean tech industrial bases. That's of utmost importance if we want to master the climate change. When we started the European Green Deal, that was back in December 2019, at the beginning of my mandate, it was all about rapid deployment of renewable energies. Now, it's all about access to technology, access to raw materials, and scaling up of manufacturing. And we all share these priorities. This is good. But the common goal must be the build-up of clean tech capacities, but not at each other's expense. Otherwise, it's going to end up in a zero-sum game. What the world desperately needs is a huge leap in the deployment and rollout and development of these technologies, and this across the globe. The demand is colossal. So our incentives should be mutually reinforcing, not competing, and the opportunities are there without any doubt, and this will be a big topic also to discuss at the G7. My final word is on infrastructure, strengthening our economic security and diversifying. All of this implies, of course, also going beyond our circles of G20 or G7. It means reaching out to new countries with new offers, offer partnership. And this is what, as you know, Global Gateway is all about. Now, in Hiroshima, we'll co-chair with President Biden and Prime Minister the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, an abbreviation PGII. PGII integrates all the different activities around this topic, for example, also our Global Gateway. This is the flagship G7 initiative, which we started in Elmau last year. The aim of this side event is to mobilize the private sector. So we have invited leading CDOs to discuss with us the concrete proposals and the way forward. They have to bring the private capital. We have to bring the de-risking and the conducive investment environment, and that's what the side event will be all about. So this is my outlook on the next week to come. Over to you, Michel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And this is indeed a very important week for the EU, for the G7 members, and for the international cooperation. In Reykjavik, Hiroshima, and Seoul, we will send a strong message of European unity to the world. The EU is a union of values, is a force for peace, stability, and prosperity in the world, and we want to cooperate closely with our international partners to reinforce our impact and to make the world a fairer place. We all know the strategic importance of values for Europe, and the times call for stronger partnerships around those values. The EU and the Council of Europe are deeply interconnected. Our EU member states are all members of the Council of Europe, and we share the same DNA based on democracy, human rights and rule of law. So together, we must defend these values in the face of growing inequalities and authoritarian regimes, and against those who may think they can get away with aggression with impunity. And Russia's war against Ukraine is the latest and most blatant example. Those responsible must be held accountable for violating international law and the multilateral rules-based order. And we therefore strongly support establishing the Register of Damage, which is the first step towards an international mechanism for the reparation of damage, loss or injury in Ukraine. And we will work even more closely together at these testing times, the EU and the Council of Europe, to make our continent more stable, more prosperous and anchored in universal values. We have also this very important G7 meeting, and we are absolutely convinced that we can make a real difference in 3 areas: the war in Ukraine, international cooperation, and economic resilience and security. We are closely following the situation on the battlefield. Ukraine is pushing back the Russian invaders, but fierce fighting continues. Right now, Ukraine needs more military support, and fast. This will be crucial to its counteroffensive. Our member states are working hard to supply Ukraine with more of what they need. We have stood by the people of Ukraine since day one with solidarity and resolve, and EU citizens have stepped up too, showing extraordinary solidarity with the millions fleeing the war. At the G7, we will reaffirm our support for President Zelensky's peace formula. Any credible peace plan must be anchored in the principles of the UN Charter, and we are extremely clear. Only Ukraine has to decide when to consider potential negotiations, only Ukraine. The EU and its member states have also provided over 70 billion euros in overall assistance to Ukraine, and with the IMF latest support and with G7 contributions, this closes the funding gap for Ukraine in 2023. This is an important signal from partners who stand by Ukraine in its hour of need. For over 14 months, the EU has taken action to weaken the Russian military, and our sanctions target political figures, oligarchs, businesses, and other key backers of this illegal war. This has never been done before. It was not easy. It is not easy. It took a lot of dedication of the 27 leaders, and we are negotiating an 11th package that will close loopholes and further prevent Russia from acquiring crucial supplies. At our G7 meetings, key global players like Australia, Brazil, India, Indonesia, South Korea and Vietnam will also join us, and we will discuss openly and frankly about why we are convinced these sanctions are necessary and justified. Russian propaganda is built on lies and conspiracy. We are fighting back with the facts and figures. Developing and emerging countries have expressed concerns that the G7 is focusing too much on Ukraine and not paying enough attention to their needs and priorities. And we have heard their concerns. We want to build strong partnerships with developing and emerging countries in ways that are mutually beneficial. The EU and its member states are by far the largest provider of global development assistance. Last year, 90 billion euros. We will continue to be a trusted and reliable partner to reduce poverty and to improve people's lives. Multiple global crises have strained the finance of developing countries. G20 countries must cooperate to find a common solution to support low and middle-income countries in debt distress. Multilateral Development Bank also play an important role, and that's why we support the G20 presidency's work on the reform of the multilateral development banks. Together, we need to build a global system where power is distributed more fairly, reform of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, and inclusion of the African Union in the G20 would be steps in the right direction. COVID and Russia's war against Ukraine have shown how dependent and vulnerable our economies are. And we have already taken action to reduce our dependencies and address our vulnerabilities by diversifying and strengthening our most crucial supply chains. So we should build strong and mutually beneficial partnerships with developing and emerging countries. We are also shoring up our economic security through instruments such as export controls, foreign direct investment screening, and we have agreed our anti-coercion instrument. We'll, of course, coordinate with our G7 partners on how best to respond to coercive actions by third countries on a case-by-case basis. After the G7 summit, we'll have the occasion to be in the Republic of South Korea, one of the EU's most valued partners, and we are determined to address the bilateral relationships with them. You know that in the field of the Green Deal, in the field of the digital agenda, we have concrete projects and we are determined to cooperate with them on all those important questions. Dans le cadre de ce sommet entre l'Union européenne et la République de Corée, nous aurons également l'occasion d'adresser des sujets régionaux, en particulier l'ambition de l'Union européenne d'être active dans la région de l'Indo-Pacifique pour soutenir la stabilité et la prospérité de cette région et pour adresser l'ensemble des sujets de sécurité qui y sont liés. Vous le voyez, nous avons à l'agenda des sujets qui sont extrêmement importants, une vision très claire, très unie de la manière d'adresser ces sujets, dans le souci de porter les valeurs de paix, de prospérité, de stabilité, de porter les valeurs qui fondent le projet européen et de montrer à quel point nous pensons que dans ces moments turbulents, la coopération internationale est un instrument clé pour apporter davantage de stabilité et de sécurité. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. We will take some questions. Yes, Hassan. Yeah, here, Hassan.
Barzan Hassan, reporter from Kurdistan 24. I just want to ask you about the Turkish election. I would like to take your opinion, your perspective about that election. And one of the president candidated, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, he said, if we win in the election, we try to be the member of the European Union. Thank you.
So, of course, Turkey is an important partner for us. I think the massive turnout in these elections is really good news. It's good news because it's a very clear sign that the Turkish people are committed to exercising their democratic rights to go and vote, and that they value the democratic institutions. This is a big, big win of yesterday. Now the elections are still open. We have to see for the second round. We are following very closely the announcements on this file, and we have to see what the second round brings.
President Michel?
Yeah, the same answer. I think this is very important indeed to commend the Turkish citizens. An electoral process is always an important moment, and we will follow what will be the outcome, what will be the result of this electoral process.
Yeah, Sam?
Sam Fleming from the FT. Two questions on sanctions ahead of the G7, please. On the question of sanctions evasion, there are concerns that hitting third countries hard as part of a crackdown on sanctions evasion could end up driving them diplomatically closer to Russia. How do you recognise that risk when it comes to cracking down on sanctions evasion, and how do you get the balance right on this? And on the same topic, China has warned of a strong reaction if the EU sanctions its companies because of concerns about products going to Russia's military. Has there been any dialogue with China about this topic? And again, is the risk of retaliation here a price worth paying? Thank you.
So the sanctions are in the making, if I may say so. They are being discussed in Coreper. It's important to have a look what we have in the package as a proposal. There is, first of all, what you referred to, the anti-circumvention ban. Indeed, we have seen that in some third countries there's a huge surge of trade with European goods, exponentially, in the last month. And here we see that there is a discrepancy between what starts in the European Union, transits Russia, and then ends up in the third country. And therefore, we are discussing, as a deterrent, the question whether there should be such a transit ban. There are several watch points within the mechanism to make sure that it is justified. But this is being discussed at the moment with the member states. And then there is, of course, also the extension of the transit ban, what I just said, physically through Russia. So it's working on dual use at the moment being on weapons, and now on advanced technologies, aircraft components and jet fuels. There's a second element. This is, you were referring also to, regarding third countries that buy directly in the European Union and then potentially deliver sanctioned goods to Russia. Here too the discussion is, and it's basically a warning that we're serious about our sanction, that we could ban these goods from going to that third country if there is clear evidence that this is a circumvention of sanctions and deliveries to Russia.
Yeah, this is, I think, very important to have a clear strategy towards China. And that's why a few months ago, it was last year, we had a strategic debate in the European Council on China. Strategic debate without conclusions, but I intend to put the topic to China on the agenda of the European Council in June. It has been prepared, and it is prepared at the ministerial level under the auspices of the High Representative Josep Borrell. And I feel that from a political point of view, the member states are more and more converging based on three important elements. First, it's very clear that we will always stand up for our values and democratic principles, very clear. Point two, very important to de-risk our relationships with China. Economic security, importance to rebalance our economic relationships with China. And I am observing, not only on the EU side, but also in the United States, for instance, I'm observing that the common goal is de-risking, not decoupling. And point three, extremely important to address together the global challenges. Climate change, health. These are the pillars, these are the elements on which I think we should base our relationships with China. We are not naive, we are lucid. It's important to express a united common European position on China. It's important to work closely with our international friends, allies, partners. We'll have the occasion in the G7 to address those topics, but I'm absolutely certain that the EU has an important role to play to make sure that our interests are properly defended.
Yes, please. Wait until it's red.
Rebecca from Carbon Pulse. So this morning you said that a growth model centered on fossil fuels is obsolete. So how will you persuade countries like Japan that still rely heavily on fossil fuels to phase them out quickly at the summit? Thank you.
We know that our growth model that is based on fossil fuels is obsolete because it's destroying the foundation of our existence. It's the basic reason, the carbonized industry, why we have the effects of climate change as we are seeing that right now. So the European Green Deal, since the very beginning, focuses on a new growth model, and that is with a decarbonized industry, relying on sustainable energies, which are the renewable energies. That's what we're working on, a circular economy and based on renewable energies. With Japan, we have the very first green alliance, the European Union and Japan. And this is an overarching cooperation on all these different tracks that we're working on also in the European Union to move forward the principles of a green, a clean and healthy economy. Therefore, it's one of our most important partners in this project. Of course, there are different approaches in different regions of the world, but the aim must be to have a climate neutral economy and to reach climate neutrality and to decarbonize the economy. And that's what we're working on with Japan.
Yeah, the EU is the leader in terms of green transition. This is extremely clear for many years, and we have decided to speed up our efforts. But at the same time, because we believe in international cooperation, it's also important to engage with the rest of the world, in the G7, the G20, but also with the Global South on those topics. And we know that the transition is the most difficult topic at the EU level. Sometimes also difficult debates related to the transition and how we need to take measures in order to reach this common goal, which is climate neutrality. And that's why I would like to insist it's very important to be in speaking terms with the Global South, not only with Japan or the G7 members, in order to talk with them and to develop some common projects, common partnerships, in order to reach a common goal, but to take into account also the different realities and starting points in different countries.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vince Chadwick from DevEx. A question to President Michel. You spoke about the need for unity and also multilateral development banks. But when the Ukraine investment platform was launched last week, there was a notable absent player, and that was the European Investment Bank, the EU bank. Can you explain why the EIB is not a member of that platform and whether that's a mistake? And to President von der Leyen, the EBRD, which is leading that platform actually, is having their annual meeting this week. And the Commission's obviously one of the biggest shareholders of the EBRD. One of the questions the shareholders will be considering is a potential expansion into sub-Saharan Africa, which is an idea which has been around for, I think, more than 5 years, and it still hasn't happened. And the bank is still pursuing it, despite the clear needs in Ukraine. And isn't it time for EBRD to focus on its historic expertise and back garden, which is Ukraine, rather than expand into sub-Saharan Africa? And if it is time to expand into sub-Saharan Africa, does the Commission support a capital increase for EBRD? Thank you.
Yeah, the first situation, of course, I'm not able to comment the participation or the absence of the EIB in a meeting, but I can assure you that I'm very confident that the European Investment Bank will play an important role for the reconstruction of Ukraine. I'm absolutely convinced that the member states, which are the shareholders of the European Investment Bank, will make very clear that we count on the EIB to play a very important role from a strategic point of view. This is a key, in my opinion. For the EBRD, active in sub-Sahara or in other part or in the potential part of the world where they are supposed to be active, I do not intend to express a lot of comments. But I think indeed that in these times, in these difficult times, this is useful if the EBRD would make the choice to strengthen its efforts and its investment in those parts of the world, in Ukraine, but probably also in some other countries in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think also this is an as well as. The EBRD is very active in Ukraine, and we are very grateful for that. So they are doing a great job, but this does not mean that they are excluding other opportunities, and therefore I think it's an as well as.
Irini. No, sorry. No follow-up. No, sorry, Irini, please. There was a specific question. No, thank you. You asked a question, the answers are given. Irini, please, you have the floor.
Thank you.
But we're not going to discuss that.
No, please.
Where else?
Irini, go ahead.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks,
It's on food crisis, because the food crisis is not over. Now it's open. European Union has managed to focus on food crisis in 2022, but the wars is not over. That express their concern on imports of agricultural products from Ukraine. Thank you.
So we should never forget how the food crisis started. And it is Russia's atrocious war that started the food crisis. We should never forget that it is Russia that bombarded the filled warehouses with grain in Ukraine, that Russia blocked the corridor to the Black Sea, which was the main route to export the grain to the world. Ukraine was one of the main suppliers of the world with grain, and this crisis has been triggered by the Russian war. I think this is always important to make that very clear. Now, since then, we've been working intensively to solve the problem. For example, we have established the solidarity lanes, and 60% of the grain is going out via the solidarity lanes. 40%, thanks to the Black Sea grain deal, is going out again via the Black Sea, although Russia tries over and over to block the corridor that is enabling Ukraine to transport the grain to the Black Sea. Now, what we have to do is that we make sure that we do not have a bottleneck here in the European Union of the Ukrainian grain, so that we have a seamless transit throughout the European Union. It's not trivial, because you need a lot of transport capacity to make sure that this grain that typically went through the Black Sea now takes other routes. I think it's important that we keep these routes up, so the solidarity lines absolutely up and running. Therefore, we are now establishing a platform where we have all the different stakeholders, the 5 frontline countries, of course the other member states, Ukraine and other players, to make sure that we have a seamless processing of agri-food products from Ukraine to the European Union, but also transiting the European Union and going to other destinations in the world. So it's a lot of hard work, but I think it is successful work if you keep in mind why this all started.
Yes. Yes, please.
I'm with China Media Group. Both of the presidents just mentioned China. As we understand, a special representative of the Chinese government will start a 5-day tour, including Ukraine, Poland, France, Germany, and Russia, starting from today, for a political settlement on the crisis. As I understand, he is the most senior official, Chinese official to visit Ukraine ever since February 2022. So what is your comment on this new development? Thank you.
I think it is very good that finally, after 14 months, President Xi called President Zelensky. Before my trip to China, I had spoken to President Zelensky and he had asked me to raise this issue, what I did, and President Macron did too. It is very good that President Xi spoke to President Zelensky because President Xi has, without any doubt, influence on President Putin. And as a member of the Security Council of the United Nations, China also has a specific responsibility to do, like everybody else, the utmost that Russia stops the aggression. This is of utmost importance. Then my second take very clearly is there is a proposal on the table. That is the peace formula of President Zelensky. And this is the basis on which we should be working, because Ukraine is the country that has been invaded. And it is important that we deliver with Ukraine the proposals on the peace formula so that we can discuss how to move on in this very difficult topic. China plays an important role because of its influence on Russia, and this is needed.
Michel?
Yeah, I would like to confirm that, in our opinion, it's very important to make very clear that everyone respects the UN Charter, and that's why the peace formula is a fundamental basis for us, because the basic principle is the territorial integrity, the territorial sovereignty, and there is one thing absolutely clear: there is an aggressor, Russia, and a victim, Ukraine. And that's why we've decided to support Ukraine as much as we can, and we sincerely hope that China will play a positive role in order to convince Russia to stop this aggression and to respect the UN Charter. It is very easy to end the war. If Russia would decide to respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine, this can be immediately the end of the war.
Philippe.
Philippe Jacquet, Le Monde. Je reviens à un sujet plus européen sur le Green Deal. La semaine dernière, le PPE a été extrêmement dur avec un certain nombre de nouveaux textes du Green Deal qui doivent être discutés et approuvés. On a eu le président de la République française qui a aussi mis ou demandé une pause sur ces questions législatives et réglementaires. Donc, je voulais savoir quel était un peu votre soutien sur ces questions-là.
So first of all, I want to make very clear that President Macron, from all the way through, has been and is a strong supporter of the European Green Deal. And actually, the Parliament, of course, EPP too, because we should not forget, it was in December 2019 that I presented the European Green Deal. At that point, it was just a vision, a political proposal in my guidelines. Then, all of us together, we've been able to cast climate goals in law. We were the first region in the world to do that, and not many have followed suit, because to cast this in law means all 27 member states have committed to reach our climate goals by 2030 and by 2050. So this is the outlook, but much more important is the detailed roadmap to get there. This is what we call Fit for 55. All 27 member states have committed to reach our climate goals by 2030 and by 2050. So this is the outlook, but much more important is the detailed roadmap to get there. This is what we call Fit for 55. And here too, it's a huge legal package. We're basically done with it. And this would not have been possible without the strong support of the European Parliament, without the strong support of the European Council, and all those you mentioned are part of this. The Fit for 55 has in it one of the most powerful instruments to fight climate change and to cut emissions, and this is the emission trading system. We enlarged and strengthened the first pillar on industry, but we also enlarged the emission trading system on other sectors, like buildings and roads, and we put in place the Social Climate Fund. I'm very brief now on an enormous amount of different legal proposals that set out the legal frame for the European Green Deal. So I think this is something really to be proud of. But of course, we cannot be complacent because the climate crisis is moving on, and we have to do more and we have to be better. Now, we still have proposals in Parliament, and I must, not only on the European Green Deal, but also on other topics. These are hundreds of proposals still open, so a lot of work ahead of us, so that we should have a look about what the absorption capacity is concerned. And this is something which we will do in the next weeks or months. But in general, if you focus now again, not on the general part of proposals in the Parliament, but if you focus again on the European Green Deal, we have made an amazing progress.
Madam.
My name is Katalin Nagy from Hungarian Radio. I would like to ask, connecting Ukraine, what do you think of leaked secret information that Ukrainian President Zelensky talked about attacking Friendship oil pipeline because it could destroy Hungary's industry?
I have no knowledge of this. I'm sorry.
No.
Excuse me, but no one denied the information.
Yeah, sorry. That's the answer. Tom.
Ich wollte noch mal zurückkommen auf die Regulierungsphase von Monsieur Macron. Ich habe jetzt nicht ganz verstanden, ob Sie diese Forderung für gerechtfertigt halten oder nicht. Und wie weit sind Sie denn mit Ihrem Prinzip One in, One out? Können Sie das mal ein bisschen erklären, was Sie alles jetzt aus der Gesetzgebung rausgenommen haben, nachdem Sie diese ganzen Berge von Gesetzgebung vorgeschlagen haben?
Teile der Gesetzgebung sind zum Beispiel Harmonisierung des Binnenmarktes. Das heißt, indem Sie harmonisieren, nehmen Sie 27 verschiedene Regulierungen raus und ersetzen sie durch eine. Große Erleichterung für unsere Industrie, große Erleichterung für unsere Unternehmen, ohne Zweifel. Nochmal, Präsident Macron ist ein starker Unterstützer des European Green Deals. Und dafür bin ich sehr dankbar, denn wir brauchen Frankreich und Frankreich setzt sich dort mit aller Kraft auch ein. Das, was die bürokratischen Lasten angeht, zum Beispiel die Berichtspflichten. Dort haben wir sehr klar gesagt, dass wir bis Sommer vorlegen in den 3 verschiedenen großen Themen, Europäischer Green Deal, das Thema Digitalisierung und das Thema Resilienz, eine Reduktion der Berichtspflichten um 25%. Mir ist sehr wichtig, dass wir dieses Ziel erreichen, denn das würde es ermöglichen, auch die Mitgliedstaaten zu bitten, auf ihrer Seite ihre Berichtspflichten um einen erheblichen Prozentsatz zu senken. Also, das eine ist der European Green Deal und das andere sind die bürokratischen Lasten. Ich finde, man muss sehr genau auch schauen, was zum Beispiel als Gesetzgebung auf den Weg gebracht hat, wie ich Ihnen eben sagte, die Harmonisierung und das Niederreißen von Barrieren für den Binnenmarkt ist von großer Bedeutung und großer Erleichterung für unsere Industrie. Ohne Zweifel, aber bei den Berichtspflichten bin ich der tiefen Überzeugung, dass wir deutlich zurückschneiden können.
Maria.
Hello, thanks for the floor. Maria Psara with Star TV Greece. I will take you back to the Western Balkan in our neighborhood. There was tension during the weekend between Greece and Albania because of the arrest of a candidate mayor ahead of the local elections yesterday. Are you, first of all, aware of the situation? Have you been informed by the Greek government? Which is your reaction to that? And is this arrest consistent with the rule of law and the European values, given the fact that Albania is a candidate country? Thank you.
Sorry. Can I just point out this is a press conference on the sequence of summits that the two presidents are going to be attending. Please try to focus your questions on the issues at hand. I don't know if anybody wants to react. Président Michel.
Très brièvement, pour confirmer que j'étais en contact avec le président Mitsotakis sur ce sujet-là, que mon attention a été attirée, que la représentation de l'Union européenne en Albanie a suivi de près également la situation, et si je suis bien informé, entre-temps, la personne en question a remporté les élections.
Yes. With us. Yes, we have been aware of the fact, and yes, the candidate has been released.
Oui.
Thank you. Brahim Marad for AG, the Italian news agency. President Zelensky is asking to start negotiations already in June. Do you think it will be possible, or you have to wait at least at October? And do you have a consensus among member states at the Council on speeding up this process? Thank you very much.
So there is a very clear roadmap. In June, we will have the oral presentation. This is an in-between report. Let's call it this way. The important report is the written one that is due in October. And I think the Council in December typically deals then with this wide report, not only on Ukraine, but also on other potential candidates. And this is the very rigid and formal way of procedure, but how we move forward within these three steps depends a lot on the progress of the country. And here, if you focus on Ukraine, that was one of the reasons why I was last week Tuesday in Ukraine to discuss in depth the 7 steps that are accompanying the candidate status of Ukraine. So lots of progress has been made, but still work has to be done. Therefore, we went through all the different steps. Some steps have been already concluded, but some are still a work in progress. And it depends on the candidate country, how fast they proceed and how good the quality is. Then to present to the member states the option on how to move on.
Well, I would like to confirm that we are all impressed by the progress made by Ukraine. But it is very clear that the report that will be put on the table by the Commission after the summer in October will be an important information, an important document. And then I will put the topic on the agenda by the end of the year, and the Member States will have to decide, taking into account the progress made and also taking into account the report proposed by the Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. This brings us to the end of today's press conference. Thank you for your attention.